Well, welcome to 21 Conversations about Wellness. And honestly, who better to talk about wellness and self-regulation, all the things that are necessary these days. And he's been talking about it for a little while now. Dr. Stuart Shanker, welcome, Stuart. Let me
Thank you,
just
Jim.
introduce you a little bit. Co-founder and CEO of Merit, founder of Self-Regulation Institute, an acclaimed author of multiple books, including his brand new one, which is Reframed, Self-Regulation for a Just Society. That just came out in 2020. Where did you find time to write a book in the midst of a pandemic?
It's because of that. No.
Well, good for you. I love it. We've been working together on and off.
Long time now, Jim.
It's over 20 years. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Fantastic.
I did.
And
I was just working it out.
it's been a delight of mine, my personal delight. So today we're talking across Canada to a variety of partners of RTO ERO, and I'm sure of self-regulation for sure. And maybe I'll just start off with a question that really sort of gets us into it a little bit. So our world has changed rather dramatically because of COVID-19, and many of us have gone through I've called it turmoil, but this has been a collective period of turmoil, and of course, it affects people differently and more acutely than others, some of them. So do you see any potential for us to grow from what we've experienced over these 14 months, both as individuals and collectively?
It's a really good question. And I wondered, Jim, if it'd be okay with you if I put on my science hat a little bit today.
Absolutely.
There's actually a real interesting science story here. We can manage stress in very positive growth promoting ways or negative ways, what we call maladaptive ways, ways that maybe work for the moment, but create more stress down the road. And it's all based on the work of an American physiologist, a guy called Walter Bradford Cannon, who's really the founder of this theory. And at the beginning of the 20th century, he coined the term homeostasis. And self-regulation is a theory of homeostasis, which just means a system with multiple parts that keeps on working well, that stays in balance. But Cannon said a further point, which I don't think is ever mentioned and was actually critical to his theory. And that was that homeostasis has to be tied to growth. If you do not have growth, you will not have homeostasis. And what he had in mind here is we now use the term allostasis. That's the term we use ever since Bruce McEwen. And what it means is that a homeostatic system, like the human being, it's really a hierarchical system. So you've got cellular processes, you've got the brain, but you've also got a thinking mind, and that's part of the system. And what that thinking mind does is it has what's called a feed-forward mechanism. We anticipate stress. We learn how to deal with stress. We learn how to mitigate the effects of stress. So, the common example that we'll give is we learn that in Canada in February, it's a pretty good idea to put on your hat and gloves when you're going outside. And that's a way of reducing the stress of cold weather. So if we don't have growth, so this is a kind of negative response to Jim's question. If we don't have growth in this condition, then we will not have homeostasis. We will have, in fact, what's called cacostasis. Things will start to break down. In your question, I was very interested in what you said at the end of it. You said, can we grow as individuals and can we grow collectively? And in fact, I think the answer to that is that if it's not both, it's neither.
I love it. And I love that you're staying with the science end of this. It's so important for people to understand. They know how they're feeling, and it may not be very good after 14 months, depending on where they happen to be in their own sort of thinking at this point. But we need to better understand our own triggers, our own stresses.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can sort of break down some of the stress domains for us. It helps people, I think it'll help people understand what their stress level is and how they can approach sort of finding a regulatory method to bring it down.
And the 5 domains are, first of all, physical, the biological domain. So that's things like temperature, noise, and so on. Those are stresses, real stresses. The next one is emotional, and that's the one that we all get. Emotional stresses that are capitalized on by people that want to sell us a vacation, a cruise. The next one is a very interesting one, and it's called cognitive stress. Now, Reframed, the reason I wrote Reframed was because I wanted to write a book on cognitive stress. That's why I wrote it. And cognitive stress, the best example is math. Math is a cognitive stress. And what that means is it makes great demands on working memory. And if you have if a child has certain kinds of processing deficits, then they find math incredibly stressful. In fact, so stressful that they shut down or they run out of class. But we're at a point today where math instructors, they're pretty damn good. And they figured out all kinds of ways, even that guy that you and I work with, John Mighton, they figured out all kinds of ways of reducing the stress so that we can prevent that avoidance response to math and help a child succeed in math. So that's what the cognitive domain is all about. It's about understanding what cognitive stress is so that we can help children become successful learners. And then the last 2 domains are the social domain, and that's pretty easy. Students any age are under tremendous social stress. Anyone with social media is under the most unbelievable social stress.
Yeah.
Then the last one, which was kind of the one that really, the reason why I guess I wrote the book, because I was actually sent to Oxford. I was sent there by Northrop Frye, but they arranged for me to meet Pierre Trudeau. And Trudeau's message to me was, I started off and I said to him, I was a young guy, I was gushing because he was my hero. And I told him, Prime Minister, I can't tell you how moved I was by the Just Society speech. And his response was, he said, well, then don't screw up at Oxford because the secret lies in education. And he said, everything you learn, you got to bring back here to Canada and then teach us. And so that 5th domain is all about that. It's the reasons that are holding us back from becoming a just society. I'm like many educators and administrators, a little bit concerned about the decline in pro-social values and why that's happening. And it's because it's a stress, and it's a stress that, again, we have lots of research telling us how to manage it. So can I just add one sort of caution here?
Sure.
When you asked your question, the way you phrased it, I picked up on the words was, how can we control these stresses? But in self-reg theory, we don't control stress. And we actually draw a fundamental distinction between control and self-regulation. And the reason is the following. If we try to get a kid to control their stresses, what we're doing is trying to get them to suppress their impulses. But what we now know is that suppression is a huge stress. It's a huge physiological stress, and it will, down the road, sooner or later, it's going to result in behavioral problems or physical problems. So instead, what we want to do is we want that kid to figure out, well, first recognize that I am overstressed, and then start to ask themselves, why am I overstressed? What were the stresses that led to this? And then, how can I deal with those? What are the things I can avoid? What are the things? So that's really what we're looking at when we look at self-regulation as opposed to control.
It's interesting. I understand that control is really not in our ability. And in many cases, there are stressors that all sort of fit within your domains.
Yeah.
There are stressors that cause stress, but over which we have absolutely no impact. I mean, it happened. I mean, the pandemic is the classic example here. And you think of a principal or a vice principal or a child in a
Yes.
school or a director of education, like
Yes.
the one you mentioned, the great one. These are things that are beyond anybody's control. And yet how they step up and how they manage that is idiosyncratic. It's really a challenge for people to sort of find a way through this and guide other people through it.
Yeah, and hence the point of today.